And welcome to today's webinar, IT Insights, HIPAA Compliance Today versus Yesterday. I would now like to introduce Mark Green, co-founder and business development manager for Stryker Networks. Welcome back, Mark. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dawn. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Green. I'm co-owner of Stryker Networks. We're an IT firm that provides IT services for the healthcare industry. And today, I think this is our third webinar. And so thank you for participating and being part of it. And hopefully I can make it somewhat informative for you. Today, we get to talk about the super exciting, fun-loving, and elusive HIPAA compliancy. So let's begin. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about what is HIPAA. We're going to discuss what a BAA is, a business associate agreement, and kind of how that plays into securing your network and who you're working with and dealing with. We're going to talk about the enforcements and fines that we're seeing going out there from the HIPAA group. Some recent changes that have happened for telemedicine and some of the relaxation of the enforcement for that. We're going to talk about how to securely store and encrypt and keep secure all the patient health information. We're going to talk about how to securely file transfer information back and forth. It's a little bit different now because we're working in a home environment, and we need to look at that as well. And then we're going to have time for some questions and answers. So hopefully you'll find this informative, and we'll get started. Just to let you know that we are not a law firm. I am not an attorney, so everything that I'm talking to you today about, you need to verify on your own and just make sure that you fully understand the different aspects of the security side of the HIPAA legislation. So what's HIPAA? HIPAA is the Health Information Portability Act, which started in 1996. It's to establish some privacy between the protected health information, PHI, or patient health information, or personal health information. All of those are used and are all talked together, all put together like that. And so we're going to talk about the rules and how that pertains to that. Obviously, the government through Obamacare, Affordable Health Care Act, wanted to be able to protect the patient's information, and with technology the way that it is and being able to move and transfer information, they want to make sure that it was done in a secure manner. They're also trying to figure out how to strike a balance between securing the information, but at the same time allowing the practices to be able to practice medicine. And so they're trying to walk that fine line. So that's why a lot of the rules are obscure at best. It's handled and designed and regulated by the Office of Civil Rights for the Health and Human Services Department. They're the ones that enforce the rules. They're the ones that regulate the rules. They're the ones that wrote most of the rules. And just so you understand, this applies not only to electronic health information, it applies to physical as well. If you have patient charts left behind in an exam room for the next patient to come and look at, that's in violation just as much as having an email sent with the patient's healthcare information. But we're going to be looking at and talking primarily on the electronic side of things and not the physical side of things. All right. So again, we're going to talk about the security rule of HIPAA, not all of HIPAA, just as it relates to security. And security rule is a subset of the HIPAA privacy rules that help protect the individuals. And what it's protecting is all electronic, personal, or private health information of an individual, whether it's created, whether it's received, meaning that it's being transmitted via email or other manners, maintaining it, and there's regulations on how do you keep that information secure as you maintain it, how you transmit it, and how you look at it. The whole thing is they want to make you aware that there's some things here that we need to look at and protect. And if we're going to open up using IT or using other ways of transmitting that information, you have to make sure that it's secure. And so our job at Stryker, as well as other IT firms, are to make sure that you're in compliance with that so that you're not being held in violation of that. The entities that are covered for that are all healthcare providers, which would include you, health plans, healthcare clearinghouses, and other business associates, which would be us, third party, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Again, the deal here is that make sure that all the information is confidentially secure, but still available to be able to be used by the healthcare provider. We need to be able to think about it proactively. We need to look at it and say, are we doing everything that we can to protect this information? And everything that we do. And that includes having a discussion with a PA, RN, and the doctor standing outside of a patient's room, and where they can overhear you talking about another patient's information. It's all the safeguards. It's a change in mindset, which I'm sure we're all doing now. HIPAA's been around for a long time. Hasn't been enforced very well up until recently, but it's been around a long time. And I think we're all pretty good at not sharing that information. But we as an IT company, and the purpose of this webinar is to make sure that using any kind of electronic means that you're looking at it the same way that you would look at it as if you're going to verbally communicate that information. So let's talk a little bit about the BAA, or the Business Associate Agreement. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but if you're not, we need to understand what that is. And so what that is it's a document between you, the practice, and any third-party contractor. And that includes your practice management system, your EMR system. That includes anything that has to do with IT as it relates to the being in contact with or having access to personal health information, or PHI. So who needs to sign the BAAs? Any contractor that has access to that personal health information, which would be us, and as well as, let me explain something to you. This is how they look at this. Let's say there's a breach, and they want to say, okay, what have you done to protect that information? So let's look at everything. Where did this breach take place at? What happened during it? So give you an example. If we sign a BA with a practice, we're letting the practice know and understand that we're obligated to certain things, that we understand that we're going to be in contact potentially, not always, but potentially be in contact with personal health information, whether it's remote support, seeing it on a screen, walking in and working on a individual user's computer and seeing that information on the screen, whether it's the database, the practice management system. We work with all those entities. And so our obligation is that we understand, that you understand that we have certain things that we have to abide by. So we have to have internal policies in place to state that when any of our engineers access this information, here's what we're responsible for to do and to not do with that. But it carries even further than that. Let's say you have a backup system. You have an on-premise practice management system, and you have a backup to back up that information. You need to back it up because you need to make sure that if something happens to that data, you can recover it, right? So that gets backed up locally on a device. Well, is that device accessible physically from somebody walking into a room and grabbing that device that houses it, whether it's the server or what's called a network access storage device? Do they have access to be able to steal that? Somebody breaks in and steals that. So is that secured physically? And then most of the time, as a normal practice for us in best practices, is that we make there's a copy of that being held in the cloud somewhere, so that if that facility burns down, we still have the data and the access to be able to restore it, right? And so if that's the case, we as Stryker, we have to have a BAA with the facility that hosts and holds that information. We have to have a BAA with the backup software, the provider stating that they encrypt all the software and all the data as it's being backed up, and then when it's being transmitted offsite to an offsite facility, that in transit that's being encrypted, and then where it's sitting or at rest at the facility, the data facility, that's encrypted as well. And we have to have an agreement with them that says they understand that we are maybe have some sort of access to personal health information. So it goes all the way down the chain. It starts from the end user not talking or not leaving stuff up on the screen or physical files. It goes to the people that support it, like us. They would go in and make sure that's running. It also holds true for any practice management system as well, especially if it's in the cloud or off-site. You need to have a BAA with them as well, showing that they understand that they have an obligation to protect that data in the manner that HIPAA lays out. So it's a little confusing, but it makes a lot of sense, because if there's any one failure in that, it could open up that personal health information to nefarious people, and that's not a good thing. So you want to follow it from the beginning to the end, and they have to be updated annually. So you have to have an annual signing. It has a start date on the BAA agreement and has an end date on the BAA agreement. And that goes for any contractors that would access it. But I'll tell you another thing. As part of it on our side that we sign, we are also obligated to report any violations in that manner. So if we see a practice that we do IT work for, this should be for all IT providers. If they're providing services for an entity, a practice, and they're in clear violation on a regular basis and have no thoughts of changing that, of securing that information once it's brought to their attention, instead of saying, oh, don't worry about it, I'll worry about that later, or I'm not going to spend that money, or whatever the case may be. And this happens all the time, and I understand it. It's money. You don't want to have to spend more money than you have to. But the bottom line is that if we see a clear violation, we are obligated by the BAA, if you read it, to let the entities know, the HIPAA entities know, that you're in violation and something might happen. It's the last thing that we want to do. We don't want to have to do it, but by us signing it, we're stating that we're going to do that. So that's real important. So be aware of that as well. It says, you know, you don't, again, this reiterates what I just got done saying. You don't want to provide any access to anybody anywhere without any PHI data to anyone anywhere without a BAA. You need to cover yourself. It's a CYA effort, and you need to do that as well. Okay, and that protects you as well. It protects both entities, but you're doing your part by saying, hey, anybody that's accessing that information, we have an agreement with them, an up-to-date agreement with them, that they're responsible for certain aspects of it, and so are you. So it's to cover yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit about the enforcements and the fines of that, and the penalties of that. Again, there are violations and penalties, but it's divided up into 4 basic tier groups on the HIPAA side. Which I believe it's being enforced by the Health and Human Services directly. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they look at it a few different ways. They look at it from an unaware, I'm unaware that I'm in violation. Something happened, I wasn't aware of it, or all the way up to willfully neglect. The fines range between $100 and about $50,000 per violation. The enforcement is significantly increased starting in 2015. If you look at this chart right there, that's in the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see from 2008 to 2010, really flat line, no fines, nothing happening. Then you see a jump from 2011 to 2015, where it jumped up a little bit. There's some fines there, probably, you know, sending a signal to everybody that, hey, we're going to start fining people who are in violation, right? And so that started to increase. Then all of a sudden, from 2015 to 2016, there was a huge increase of fines. And let me tell you why. HIPAA's been around for a long time. The government put money out for meaningful use, grant money for all practices and practice management systems, EMR systems, to go ahead and spend some money to secure down and help secure all of the PHI, but either on-premise or in the cloud. And so they gave money to do that. And as doctors are, and as well as other entities, they're slow to adopt. So nobody was really adopting. Nobody was confusing and how to get your grant money and how to apply for it. We worked with a lot of clients to help them with that. but it was confusing at best. It was even confusing for us. It took forever to get the money, and then they had to go and upgrade all their hardware and blah, blah, blah. So, right? So they gave a grace period for a long time, a lot longer than they ever wanted to, until 2015, to where they said, you know what? We're done with the grace period. We extended it, extended it, extended it, extended it, and now we're going to start to put some meat to this. We're going to send a signal to everybody else that we're serious about this, and there's going to be significant fines, 600% increase in fines from 2015 to 2018. So they're now in that mode where they're going to fine you if you're in violation. No more grace, no more forgiveness, no more anything else, the exception of what's going on right now. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So the Health and Human Services are actively pursuing the violations. It is revenue for them, but also I would like to think that they're doing something to really help protect the citizens' information and help move or nudge or push the practices to make sure that they're understanding that they can't just ignore all this information, that they need to do something proactively and reactively, right? So there's been some recent changes to the HIPAA the HIPAA violations, or the lack of the enforcement of those violations as it relates to telehealth. And so the Office of Civil Rights and Health and Human Services have decided during this time to not exercise enforcing the violations for telehealth. It's interesting that the HIPAA, when they wrote the law, they wrote the document, it was really obscure in a lot of areas. They talk about using technology, but they don't define what technology is. They talk about doing certain aspects. You need to protect the health information, the personal health information, but at the same time, we don't want to stop you from doing your work. So we're going to tell you, give you some guidelines, but to enforce them are going to be a little bit difficult in the specific guide because they're not specific enough. So what's going to happen is that they're going to start fining. They're going to go to court. There's going to be judgments, and those judgments are going to define what those regulations are. Just like most laws, that's just how it works. They throw the law out there, they don't restrict it too much, they leave it open-ended because technology changes all the time, right? Again, I'm talking about the enforcement of the security side, the technology side. And so they're going to leave it open-ended. They're going to let the courts decide what's going to be enforced, what's not going to be enforced, and then they'll start enforcing from there. So in 2015, they started really pushing the enforcements, and guess what? Most of it held up. And so they collected a lot of money over that time. So right now, though, because of this COVID-19, something that's a biblical proportion, something that nobody saw coming, that nobody was prepared for telemedicine, doing telemedicine at home. Not very well, anyhow, and not in most of the practices that are out there. Some of them, maybe on the psychological side, things like that, made more sense. But from the sides of dermatologists, where they have to go and look and feel and do all that type of stuff, how do you do that via video? I'm not sure. But what I do know for sure is that practices are figuring this out. They're working the best that they can to be able to do the telemedicine. They're diagnosing the best that they can. Probably more maybe prescribing some basic salves and things like that, but they can do some diagnosing over telemedicine. You're not going to be fined for that right now, but I got to tell you something. I would be surprised, and here's what I'm hearing from everybody, that telemedicine, once this whole thing clears up, once we're all done and we're back to our practices, back to our normal routines, I'm pretty sure telemedicine is going to be a part of every practice out there, because now they're seeing some real benefits from a triage standpoint, from a patient standpoint, patient care, patient communication standpoint, to be able to touch and be in front of those patients, to be able to look at and triage and semi-diagnose the best that they can, decide whether or not you need to come in the office, you need further tests, you need something else, instead of having people that are sick waiting in waiting rooms, waiting to be treated. And so I see that as being part of the new normal. Practices are going to be using telemedicine in their practices. So that being said, once this ends and the enforcement kicks back in again for what is defined as telemedicine, that's going to be a problem, because they're going to take away all the openness that they've given you right now to be able to do this and bring it back down to the original telemedicine. It was more from medical device information being transmitted, also nursing homes and things like that, to be able to look and diagnose patients that can't get up and get around without having to physically go on site all the time. So I'm sure HIPAA is going to have to make some changes to their laws to allow for this. They just got to figure this out. And as you know, they don't move really fast. So you have to not get too used to what you have right now, because at some point it'll stop and the fines will start coming back again, right? So right now, there's different applications that you can use for public facing. And those are ones that are accepted and ones that are not accepted, right? The not accepted ones are Facebook Live, Twitch, TikTok. They're explicitly not included into the telehealth. They're excluded from being able to use that. What they want you to use and look at things like Microsoft Skype or Teams, it's called now, Zoom for healthcare, Doxy, VC. Those are all permitted. Those are permitted because they have security in place that encrypts the video files being transferred back and forth, and it allows passwords and things like that to work with patients, and allows you to put patients in a virtual waiting room and then accepting them to come in instead of people just jumping in all of a sudden. When you're using those types of services, the Teams and the Zooms and all that, it's suggested that you get a BAA with them. They have them available. It's not required, because remember, they're relaxed. All the enforcement is being relaxed right now. But if you're going to use this in the future, you want to think ahead a little bit. You want to start preparing for what it would take to do telemedicine in your office, and you want to make sure that you're using the right platforms, that you have the business associate agreement signed with them, so that you can cover yourself, cover your rear ends a little bit, right? It's also a good idea to put a disclaimer out there. Some practices are actually sending via email a disclaimer to the patients that help them understand that we're using a third-party video system that could potentially introduce some privacy flaws. And so you need to let them know and let them understand that, and have a disclaimer that we're doing everything we can on our side to make sure this is secure, but there are some possibilities of this information getting out or leaking out, right? Again, you want to use the applications that are secure, that are transmitting data like we're doing right now, back and forth securely. That's not just out into the internet where people are grabbing it and looking at this information. It's encrypted as it's traveled, and it's encrypted as it's being received. And you want to make sure that we do that. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the storage, encryption, and security. We need to talk about this because these are this is where the data sits, the PHI sits. So we have to make sure that it's properly done, that it's encrypted. All an encryption is it's a software that's embedded into the data, the information, that has a key to unlock that information. And so it has that decryption key. And so you have to make sure that whatever you use, whether it's remotely accessing, whether it's something in a practice management type system in the cloud, email, transferring files, you need to make sure that it's encrypted and that it's secure. It also has to be encrypted in transit as the data is moving back and forth from the internet, whether it's via email or shared files or whatever that might be, or video. It has to be encrypted as it transmits, and it has to encrypt where it rests, where it sits, where that data sits, whether it's on-site or off-site, whenever it's possible. In transit, the best way to secure that if you're working from home and you're connected to your office, you want to use a VPN or virtual private network. I explained that in the last webinar. It's a secure connection. It's a secure tunnel between your home computer and your office computer, or when things change, your office laptop working from home connecting to the office applications. You want to do that in a secure manner so that that data is transmitting in an encrypted fashion, so it can't be grabbed on the internet. Or if you're using a cloud-based system, something that you go to the web to use your EMR system and all that, you have to make sure that it's SSL enabled, which is secure socket layer, HTTPS, you'll see in front of the header. That's a secure connection. That means that that data is going back and forth and it's being encrypted, and that you're okay. At rest is just as important as the transmission. So you transmit the information to your cloud provider, to your EMR system. It's secure as it's being transmitted, but then it sits in a database in the cloud at a secure data center, which is where your vendor hosts its information. You have to make sure and get a BAA, and that BAA explains that that data at rest, as it's sitting in those databases, as it's sitting on those cloud servers, that it's encrypted. And so if they were to be hacked, they're not going to be able to gather that information. They'll get the data, but it'll look all mumbo jumbo. They won't make heads or tails of it. The same token is at rest also is talking about your physical devices, your servers in the office, your laptops if you have them, or your home computers if you're housing any kind of PHI. So you need to make sure that you encrypt your hard drives, especially on laptops and mobile devices. Now, mobile devices is a little trickier. I'll touch on that in just a second. Laptops, though, it's highly recommended if you have a laptop that you're bringing from your office to home and you're connecting to your home office or to your web application, there's chances that there is data that's communicating back and forth that might sit physically on the laptop. You might run a report or get some information and view it on your laptop, and you may decide to save it there because you're going to be talking with somebody or doing something and that data sits on there. To ensure that that's not going to be a problem, to ensure if somebody breaks in and steals your laptop, if you leave it somewhere, you lose it in a cab, whatever that might be, if the hard drive is encrypted, that data on that hard drive is secure, it's safe. You don't have to alert HIPAA that your PHI information that sits on your laptop was taken. As long as it's encrypted, you're not required to make that call. And most operating systems today, especially Windows operating systems, Windows 10 Professional, has a built-in software to allow us to encrypt the data. We also like to encrypt the data that sits on the servers as well. Again, somebody breaks in, steals your servers, they have that data, it's encrypted, you don't have to inform HIPAA, there's no violation there, and everything is secure. That's a must. I mean, it's easy to do, and that's something you should really consider on doing. The second thing are your mobile devices, and you got to be real careful with these mobile devices because there's no standardized good encryption software that's put on the mobile devices. There is, however, third-party applications that you can put on. For example, us at Stryker, for our clients, we provide a mobile device management software. It's software that sits on the root of the phone that allows us to be able to remove or delete data, wipe the phone, change the password on the phone in case it gets lost or something like that, so that other people can't pick it up and gather the information. It's also highly recommended that you put security on your mobile phone. And that means either, by fingerprint security, face recognition, or just a plain old password. At least do that. I know it's a pain to turn your phone on, have to put the password in every time you get your information, but it's a must. It's something that you need to do, because if that phone is lost and you have sensitive information via email, which you shouldn't have, or a application that allows you to have a mobile application to look at the EMR system, which is not good at all, you want to make sure that people don't have ready access for it. Again, if the data is encrypted on your devices and those devices are compromised in some way, you do not have to report that to the Department of Health and Health Services. So you make sure that that data is encrypted. Okay, let's talk a little bit about email. We're moving along here. You should require a BAA with any of your email providers. Office 365 embedded in the license agreement to use Office 365 email is an embedded BAA agreement. It's in the terms and conditions. And there's other providers, other email providers that also have a BAA. Also, BAA is saying that you have the capability of encrypting email, you have the capability of sending email encrypted in transit, and where it's residing at either the Microsoft or the other entities, email providers, that's being is encrypted and secure as well. So you need to check into that. So we do know that Office 365, as long as you have the Office 365 message encryption, then you're HIPAA compliant. And I'll discuss that in a few minutes. Proton is also another email system that is HIPAA compliant, as is G Suites. And it's only compliant when you use these three forms or other forms of email. It's only compliant if you're sending PHI information that's encrypted. I want to highlight encrypted. If you use these systems and you just send a flat email with an attachment with a patient's diagnosis on it, whatever that might be, because they're asking for the records, and you don't encrypt it, you're in violation. It doesn't encrypt automatically all the time. You have to make sure, even if it's set to automatically encrypt, double check and make sure it's encrypted, because you will be held responsible for that information. So again, it's only compliant if you're sending encrypted emails. Non-compliant email systems are like Yahoo, Gmail, regular Gmail, not G Suites, regular free Gmail and AOL. And we do have some people that we know that are still using those forms of email. Just make sure that you never ever send any email that has any patient information in it. Not just the attachment, but just even in the text side of it. You're not going to give any diagnosis or any recommendations or anything else that might alert anybody else that sees that email as to what the condition is of that patient, right? Just some things to make sure that you're in compliancy, and just common sense. You want to do the best you can. You want to be proactive in securing everything that you do, right? Also, we're going to talk a little bit about the file transfer, or how can the patient see their information, especially now because they can't walk in. You can't give them a printed out piece of information to give them, because right now we're all remote, and they might be asking for the records and things like that. So there's a lot of EMR systems that have that as part of their system, a secure file upload portion of the system, where the files can be uploaded to a secure location. The patient has access to that location and is able to get that information. I highly recommend using a portal. If your EMR system or whatever system that you're in has a patient portal, to input that information on that portal, because that patient, when they sign up, they put together a username and a password. Once they connect to the portal, it's encrypted, SSL encryption, so the data is being transmitted, being viewed, encrypted. You can put your information up there securely, and the patient can access that information securely at the same time. You can also utilize other file sharing programs like Dropbox Pro, not regular Dropbox, Dropbox Professional, Box, ShareFile. There's a bunch of other ones that are out there that have secure portal-like access for patients to be able to get their information. If you have any questions or information that you need to be some clarifications on that, I'd be happy to help you with that and clarify that and make sure that what you're doing is secure. Again, you're going to use that VPN, that virtual private network, to access your practice networks remotely. Very, very important. It shouldn't be open and free to the public to see that information transverse back and forth unencrypted. You want to make sure that when you send files, we just talked about this, in an email, that is done securely by encrypting those files and encrypting that email before it's sent out. So I'm going to talk to you about something that we're going to offer the ASDS members. And we're going to offer for you for free a HIPAA compliance review for your network and policies. So we're going to review your current email and file transfer policies and systems that you use. We're going to offer to be able to review, look up the current backup, disaster recovery, or business continuity of your system to make sure and review your antivirus, anti-malware, anti-spyware. That's super important because that's where the viruses, that's where the breaches come in. We're going to talk to you about the video and telemedicine and how to implement that in your practice when you get back into your practice, your physical location. We're going to talk about different samples of the BAA agreements that you can use with your other third parties that if they don't have that right now. It's a kind of a HIPAA compliancy checklist we'll provide you with that. So if you're interested in that, again, it's free. So it's easy to get something for free, right? You can email me at mgreen@strikernetworks.com, or you can call me at the number below, which is 847-908-3210. I'll be happy to schedule something with you to come out, again, reviewing your policies and all your applications. And that's all that I have for this exciting topic of HIPAA. Hopefully you found some of that informative. Hopefully there's some practical applications that you found useful. And just open up for questions right now. Back to you, Don.